A few months ago, we built a vanity for some clients of ours that went in their kids' bathroom, and now they're asking if we can build a two-step stool for in front of the vanity for their kids. And I'll show you how we do that. Okay, so I'm not the greatest draftsman, and probably the reason is I rarely, if ever, draw out or sketch out what I'm about to build. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to sketch it out just so you kind of see what we're going after. The client basically wants sort of a two-step bench. And look, the drawing's going to suck, but you get what you smell what I'm stepping in here. So what they want, oh geez, that's way off. So what they want is a bench that's 13.5 inches from front to back. I'm going to have the stair treads hang over a 1/2 inch all the way around. So it'll hang over a 1/2 inch here. We want it 13.5, which means that from the front of this to the back of this, that's going to be 13 inches. They also want it 13.5 inches from side to side. That's going to be the stair tread. Because it's hanging over a 1/2 inch on each side, it means from the outside of the two sides is going to be 13 inches. We're going to have 2 braces here and then some braces kind of in the back as well, just to sort of hold the whole thing together. There may be one here too. We'll sort of shoot from the hip and see if we need one or not, or we'll just let it so our toes can go under. So if our total distance side to side is 13 inches, these are going to end up being 1.5 inches thick for a total of 3 minus the 13. 13.5 minus half gets me down to 12, and then 12 minus 12.5. 13.5 minus a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch is 12.5. 12.5 minus 3 is 9.5. So these pieces inside here are going to be 9.5 inches. The stair treads are going to be 13.5 inches wide, as I already mentioned. 13.5, and because it's 13.5 from the front to the back, we're going to divide that between the 2 stair treads. So each one of these is going to be 6 3/4. And finally, they want a total height over here of 13 inches. Because this is going to be 1.5 inches thick, from the top of the side piece to the bottom of the side piece then is 13 minus 1.5 inches will be 11.5 inches. So we love reclaimed wood. We build a lot of stuff out of it. It looks awesome when it's done because of the character and the marks and the history that the wood has got, but it's a bit of a pain in the butt to deal with, obviously. There's no such thing, or rarely is there ever such thing as square or flat or straight barnwood. And so when in this first step, we're going to be building the sides of this stool. And I need something wide enough, and I don't have planks that are quite 13.5 inches wide, and if I did, they'd be cupped. So we're going to be gluing 3 pieces together. But as you can see, the gaps that are between this and this 2x4, for example, really nice piece of wood, is all, it's just not straight. And so it's not going to glue up very nice. And the strength of your furniture is all really a function of how well you've done your joinery and how tight the joints are, how straight everything is. So the first part of what we're always doing with our furniture is trying to figure out how to leave at least one side, if not 2, or the exposed sides, weathered, natural, and rustic looking, but have all the joinery be tight and good so that we have a strong piece of wood. So we've got 2 tools that we use to do that. One, you can use a track saw if that's what you've got at home, or we've got a slide saw. And what I'll do is for this one, I'm going to leave the 2 sides, because this one's going to be exposed on the front. This one will be exposed on the back. I'm not that worried about it because you can't see it. But I need to straighten out this edge, and both edges on the 2x4. So you'll see me on the 2x4. I'm going to set it up on the saw. I'm going to rip one side perfectly straight. Then I'll set my fence and I'll rip the other side. And then I'll straighten out these 2 edges. And you'll see how tight it'll fit together afterwards so that we can get a good glue up. So in some cases I would have run that through the joiner first to flatten out one side, so when I made my cuts I had nice 90s. But this wood was actually pretty good. It wasn't straight, but it wasn't warped. So the bottom sides were pretty flat. So now you can see when I've got these three and I go to put them together, they're quite a bit better. The thicknesses of the board are a little different right now, which is okay. I don't mind dealing with that. We'll put biscuits in when we go to glue up, just to hold this middle one up a little higher. And then I'll run the backside through the planer to get the backside nice and flat. There are a few little tiny gaps that I can see, and most of those are just from the saw blade on my saw. So I've got, like, I predominantly use Makita tools or hand tools anyways, and this little one comes in handy just to kind of square things out. And it'll give you a nice flat. There's one more spot there I can see. Yeah, now we've got a really nice tight joint. Like I say, this 2x4 is a little bit thinner, but with the biscuits, we're going to raise that up when we go to the glue up. And the backside, once we're all done, I'll sand that down, we'll flip it over and run it through the planer and get that backside just right. Okay, so now it's time to get some glue on our fingers. First thing I would do is mark out where we're going to put the biscuits. These biscuits, really all that they do is help to line up where your boards are going to be. And given that my boards are a little bit out of, they're not the same thickness, these kind of come in handy to get everything lined up from the top. And then, like I said before, I'll spend some time and plane that down. So they're not very strong, they're pretty brittle, they don't really add a whole lot to the strength of your board, they're just to help line it up, mostly up and down and a little bit side to side. And so I'm really only going to put 2 on each side, and I'll just sort of mark where those are going to go. Try to find the spot that I like the best. And you can see how that lifted it up. So because I used the joiner from the top and went down, there's a gap here, not a gap, but there's a difference between the boards. But my surface is flat all the way across. That's kind of the main advantage of the biscuit joiner in situations like this. Okay, for my stair treads, I've got the piece of wood that I want to use. I'm gonna flatten out, plane out the bottom side of it so it sits on the stool real nice and flat, and then we'll leave and sand the top side. I might skip plane it a tiny bit depending on how it kind of goes out. Okay, now if you remember from my beautiful drawing, I wanted the stair treads to be 1.5 inches thick. We're just over that right now. You can see that the bottom side I planed off, so it's nice and flat. I'm going to flip it over so it runs flat through the planer, and it's got a little bit of a cup to it like this. So the planer is going to take off the 2 edges. I'm only going to take off just enough until it has at least what I'm going to guess is going to be these 2 sides, which when I flip it back over to plane it down to thickness, will hold it level. So now this has given me a flat enough surface that when I flip it over, I can plane it flat without sacrificing more of the character. Like you can see some of the saw marks and the cracks and the checks and stuff like that. So we're at about, oh my God, right here. We're about 1 5/8. So I've got about 1/8, just under 1/8 to come off. Okay, again, if you remember from the drawing, we wanted our stair treads to be 13.5 inches. I've got both of them here by 6 3/4. So I set the table saw to 6 3/4, and I'm actually going to end up cutting off most of this planed area and leave the area that has more character. Okay, Okay, now we're going to clean up these boards just a little bit. This is probably one of, if not my favorite tools that I've got in my shop. The Makita, it's got two, it's either a random orbital sander or you can switch it so it's like the Festool Rotax deal. Takes off a lot of material quick. I mostly use it on random orbital sander, but I've got a 60 grit sandpaper on here. We're not going to press real hard, and the objective is we're just going to try clean up these boards so that they showcase some of the character. They're getting rid of some of the dirt and grime. You're getting rid of the splinters and anything that might poke out and get somebody. So by the time we go to finish, you know, we don't have any loose things left over. If you sand too much, then you get rid of everything that makes barnwood on the surface. The weathered part of it is like less than 1 millimeter thick, maybe a couple mils thick, depending on what the saw marks were like. So you sand a tiny bit, you start to see some of the saw marks, you leave the valleys because they'll take your stain or the filler or anything else afterwards. Okay, so we're back. The glue up is done. We're going to break it out of the clamps. As I mentioned before, both sides of it are built into this first glue up, so we're going to cut our notches out of the stairs. I've made up a template for the little archway on the bottom of the stools, and then we've got our stair treads, we've got all our pieces, and we'll move to assembly and then finishing. Okay, so we had a little malfunction with the camera and the whole assembly video didn't quite work. In any event, it is assembled now. Here it is. Pretty simple two-step stool for our customers for in front of their vanity, as I mentioned. And now we're going to go ahead and put some finish on it. For this, we use a number of different finishes. For this one, we're going to use the interior satin Varathane. You can buy it at Home Depot. I like it for a number of reasons. One is that it's pretty much sold everywhere, and you can grab it anywhere. And it works really good with the barnwood. So sometimes we spray it on, sometimes I brush it on. I guess it just kind of depends on how you're feeling and what you've got, whether you've got a sprayer or don't have a sprayer, but you certainly can brush it on. Every piece of barnwood is a little different. It's a little thirstier. Some of them aren't quite as much, and so I do like kind of brushing it on and seeing how it's taking it. With this stuff, I will go over kind of the whole thing once. And then look at the areas that we're soaking it up a bit more, and then go back and touch up. Try to get a pretty even coverage over the entire thing. I'll let that dry, and then I'll sand it, and then I'll come back and put another layer or two on, depending on how it's looking.